Hi, I'm Sung Ray.
I'm something else.
Here, Black Girl Soul, a podcast where we discuss the Asian dramas we love from a black female perspective. We are looking to be entertained, to learn about other cultures, and share our passion for these shows. Welcome.
Hello, everyone. This is Black Girl Soul. I am something else with
Song Ray
and Natasha.
Hello.
We are discussing Pachinko again. This time we're going to be talking about episode 3. Take it away, Sungray.
All right. Well, episode 2 left us off with Kohansu and Sunja, her telling him that she's pregnant and him revealing his truth. And so what we learn is that he is a married man with a family. He has 3 girls and his wife is in Japan and he has no intention of marrying her. So that's like heartbreaking for her. She's dealing with learning about that and realizing she's going to have to make some different suggestions and plans for her life since she is pregnant. We meet her future husband. This time we're getting to learn more about Hannah and the situation going on with her, as well as Solomon's business deal and how it turns out. That may have been most of what happened in 3. 3 didn't have too many events, but they like really delved into stuff. I think one of the takeaways for me was this intro for this one was that they put it together pretty well and showing us the Sunja from the 80s, the late 80s to Sunja in her youth and going back and forth between the things that she was dealing with. But that was pretty much overall our episode 3, unless someone else had something they wanted to add.
I think that's a great recap because the stories are starting to unfurl and you get just a little bit more about each of them while at the same time asking more questions. So I'm going to start spoiling the heck out of it so we can have that real discussion if everyone is ready.
Yep.
Okay. So, for example, we meet, I don't know completely how you say her name, is the sister-in-law,
Kyung
Kate.
Hee.
Thank you. Thank you. So we already met the sister-in-law, but the sister-in-law passes in this episode. And what Natasha will know, but the rest of us don't, is her significance. Because you know that she's a sickly character. You know that Sunja is taking care of her, but we don't know what the significance of this character is to Sunja. So I think, Natasha, last time you kind of hinted at the fact that she's just like an angel and someone who really helped Sanja.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the show is going to portray her when they go back in time to show her relationship with Sunja. But she was just a really sweet lady. And I don't want to give away too much, but I mean, we kind of know, I guess, if you've watched episode 3, that Sunja is going to move to Japan. We know she's in Japan in 1984 anyway. So when she moves to Japan, Kyung Hee was such a huge support for her. So I hope that the show gets more into their relationship.
Based off of what I saw from the previews for episode 5 and the they have the little caption picture. So like based off of what I saw there in the caption picture, that's who is in the picture. It is Sunja and Kyung Hee.
Mm-hmm.
Is that her name?
Yeah.
It's the two of them, and you see them standing there, and then they in the description they talk about her meeting her sister-in-law. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking they're going to give us some deets.
Yes. I think a book can do better at giving people lots of dimension because you get into their history and more emotional layers of people. And I don't know how the show's going to be able to do it, but the two of them, not only is Kyung Hee a huge support for Sunja when she gets to Japan, they go through a lot together on an emotional level. And I don't know, their relationship is very special. And I think you can kind of see that when you see how she's taking care of her and how much she loves her. But I hope that they get into that history of their relationship.
I know for me, in episode 3, one of the things that I really took away was I was kind of hurt by the sudden full view of Koansu. Just he was a mysterious guy who didn't seem very loving or kind to others. He seemed to care about her and, to have an affection for her. But then once we got the full view of who he was as far as being a married man with a family, oh, I have no intention of marrying you. Why are you even bringing up marriage? I was like really taken back. And I think I was even more disappointed that a 30 some odd year old man says to a 17-year-old, I thought you knew what this was. And I was like, what the hell? I was done at that point. Like, this sucker here, oh God, he's trash. Like, you didn't say that to her and really meant it, right? So I don't know. How'd you guys feel about that? Like, in my mind, he was King Fuckboy, and that was a page from the Book of Fuckboy, chapter 12, verse 2. Like, I was done.
Said about it. I'm sorry. I gotta laugh about that. Wait, say that again. He's King Fuck Boy. And he what? Read from the book of Fuck Boy?
Yes, yes.
That
The
what I
12
see.
verse 2. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, go on, Natasha. I'm sorry.
I'm upset about the way he's being portrayed. Okay, you guys know me. I can sometimes be naive about people's intentions and I want to look see the best in people. And maybe I missed it in the book, but I feel like he's being portrayed Kohansu is being portrayed on the show as more heartless than I portrayed him, like the way I perceived him when I read the book. So when I saw that, I was very upset because yes, he was married in the book. Yes, he had some daughters in the book. And yes, he told her that he couldn't marry. He wasn't going to marry her. But it wasn't like he didn't deliver it that way. And I don't know, the news is the news. So it's not good news. I can own that part of it. But I still felt like it was complicated. And I don't know if they're going to get into Kohansu's marriage or anything like that on the show. But I felt like in the book, to me, he was a more sympathetic character. The way he's being portrayed, and I don't know if it's just my naivete from when reading the book that I just didn't see it all along, but from the way I'm looking at the show, I feel like he's being portrayed as a villain. And not just in episode 3, but even in episode 4, we'll get to that. It's just, I feel like it's a departure from the book, and I don't like it.
Okay, and you all have to understand, y'all don't know Natasha, but in her language right now, she is heated. Like you don't realize this, but she is heated, y'all. Like she is normally real calm. She's darn near throwing F bombs. Y'all just don't know it. You just don't realize. I can easily see how when you read a book and you have more time to kind of, especially if you have a good writer, right? To kind of work through those emotions and where that character was coming from, especially if, and you tell me, in the book, were the characters speaking from their own voices?
I can't remember. I don't remember. I wish I had the book in front of me to look and see. But the way I took it, first of all, in the book, Sunja was more of the aggressor. Not, I don't want to say she was the aggressor. She had a right to be upset, but she was way more vocal in the book,
Go ahead, baby.
and she went off on him in the book. In the show, it's almost like he just broke her heart, and she kind of withered a little bit and ran away to figure out how to hurt him most. But in the book, she had more strength in that scene.
And I think I would have preferred to see that than what we saw
I agree.
because
Yeah.
her kind of shrinking back and then running off in the rain, that was not it for me. I was pissed off because I wanted her to tell him about himself.
Yeah, in the book, she was just like, "You want a son? You're never gonna see this son ever. He's not even gonna know about you." I mean, she just, she went off on him in the
Well,
book, and it was almost like she left him broken in the book.
mm,
That's
see, and
how
I
I
think
read
that
it.
I agree with Sung Ray. I think it would have been interesting to see her have some more complexity in character because to have an innocent girl be brokenhearted is an easy trope. Like, oh, poor thing. You got used up by some dude. You didn't know what was going on. He's an F boy. Woo, woo, woo. But to have someone who is, while still betrayed by her lover, to have her be angry and to express that would have been way more interesting a scene, just when you think about scenes.
Yeah, that's how I saw it too. Even though she came off as angrier in the book, she was still hurt. Like I still felt for her. She was still hurt, but I also had more sympathy for Kohansu's situation and the situation he was in. And I don't know where they're going to take his story and if they're going to get into it, but based on the way that this played out, I don't know how the future is going to look in the show.
I was gonna say they did in that scene while it was happening. He did have the point to stop and say it was a marriage of convenience and it wasn't like it was a true love marriage, but it was what was needed for whatever the time. So I kind of wondered were they going to delve deeper into that and explain what he meant by that because we didn't get much other than him making that statement.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope they do. I mean, and that's going to get into all these people's lives is going to take several seasons, but I hope they do. I hope they do get into it. And then it made me question in the show, did he really love her? Did he really love her, or was he just using her, or was he did love her and he was just lashing out at the fact that she's kind of rejecting him in this case? I don't know, but when I was reading the book, I didn't question his love for her, and now on the show I'm questioning whether or not he loved her or if she was just a naive girl that he could take advantage of.
Because I'm going to be honest, that was kind of where my thoughts went to as well. I was like, in my head, and why I was easily able to call him a fuckboy and feel fine with that was because it seemed like even as he got upset, he even went into lecturing her about who was going to marry her. And my thing was, he had the audacity to get angry and try to say nobody would marry her because of who her father was. And I'm going, the hell, what kind of thing is that to say when this girl just told you she's pregnant by you because you are doing what you've been doing and she's a child too? You're married. Like, dude, I had no love. And I couldn't figure out in my head, no, he couldn't possibly love her for the way he's talking to her.
Okay, so this is where I'm going to disagree slightly with you guys, and maybe it's because I'm imbuing the characters of the story with things that are not there. But I think he loved her in the way that a man can love of that time period. Like, I'm throwing in that time period. Number one, she was 17. Who knows when young women were getting married then? You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe they're getting married at 15 or 16 or something like that. She was of marriageable age, maybe in that world. Maybe. Also, of course, he was completely wrong for not telling her from the get go that he was married, had kids, the whole 9 yards. Like, this is what it is. Because he knew she was an innocent, conservative girl in a conservative world. There's no way she would have been dipping it low with dude if she had known what was up. But I also think that maybe he didn't expect her. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, maybe he thought he was going to get it in because he's working in this little fish town, whatever. I don't think he expected her. I think he did love her or care about her. But he also knew things that he knew she didn't know. Like, her circumstance was not grand. Like, she knew she had that stigma of her father, and they were doing well for themselves. They were solid middle class, maybe, but there weren't all these suitors at the door for her. I mean, she's in prime marriageable age, beautiful girl, going to the markets all the time. She didn't have a man. She didn't have any kind of prospects. Like, let's keep it a buck about Sunja.
I still don't think that makes it okay though, because regardless of her situation, what I'm saying is if you love a person, you don't dig into their pain. He
Well, no,
dug into her pain because he was pissed off.
I think they were arguing, and he did the thing that people do when they argue. Unfortunately,
They
it's
wasn't
not
arguing.
nice.
They wasn't arguing in that show. They was not arguing.
They were
She said,
arguing.
"I'm pregnant." No, they were not. He was doing the talking. She said, "I'm
Mm,
pregnant." He says, "Oh, okay, great. Well, I'm gonna have a wonderful son. How do you know it's
right.
gonna be a son?" Like they would do all of that. And when
And
she said marriage,
then she said, we should get married and yada yada. And then he told her, no, that's not gonna happen. And she's looking all broken hearted, like, what the hell, dude? And then he lashes out because he's mad that she's like
right?
not
But
down for the
that's
program.
my point. Is it wasn't an argument. They literally were not arguing. She stated her points. He got upset, and then he started lashing out.
That's, to me, they were in conflict. I mean, whether you want to call it an argument or
I get
not,
it. They were in conflict, but I don't feel like it
right?
was a. The reason I'm saying it wasn't an argument is because I want to keep in mind, and as we keep talking, this is a 36-year-old man and this is a 17-year-old woman, and regardless of marriageable time periods, she has a certain mentality that we have to keep in mind, and he has a mentality that we have to keep in mind. And I feel like his mentality should have been the more mature in the story.
Is he 36?
According to what I read, yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I was never clear on how much older he was. I knew he was older. I thought it was just 10 years, but it could be that much more, like 20 years older. I was trying to think about what he thought her reaction was going to be, and I think in the book and in the show, I don't know that it would have been different. I think his expectation was, I'm going to have a separate family here in Korea. Like, I got my Japanese family that I don't really care for too much, and I'm going to have like my real love family, and I can't marry you on paper, but
I'll
at least
make
this is
it.
how that's how I wanted to see it. Like, I'm going to be your unofficial husband, basically. Like, when I'm here, I'm your husband, and when I'm not here, I'm going to be taking care of you guys. So, and 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 maybe that's harder to see on the show, but in the book, that's how I read it, and that's why I felt like, he really had love for her, and he was just in a situation where he couldn't marry her, but if he could, he might have. I don't know if he would have been as rich and powerful if he wasn't married to a Japanese woman. He probably wouldn't be, but
Yeah, I definitely think he was ratchet for even having that. Like, there have been men, and we know about this, who have those scenarios and those setups. But he was ratchet. He knew he was ratchet. My thing was, come on now, like, you gonna have, come on,
yeah, I
dude,
don't know.
like,
I think he was.
he was
I
ratchet.
think for the time period, we if we think about it in that time period, where you really get married for your husband to provide for your family. And so he was basically saying, I'm going to do that for you. I can still do that for you. I have that love for you. You're still going to be basically my wife. We just won't be together all the time. And so I feel like his intentions were to take care of her and have this family and to be happy while he was there. I thought that's how I took it, and I did have sympathy for him.
I agree
And
with
see,
you
Natasha,
totally, Natasha. At that
oh
time, I do feel like he thought that was what was going to happen. That she
no,
would just be okay with him providing the house and taking care of her family and the kids, and
no,
everything was going to be great. And we might even have more children because I want to think he said that, but I'm not
yes.
sure. But I felt like he thought we're going to grow a full family here.
But that was still super duper ratchet, and he knew it was ratchet. It's the logic of an old school F boy. Think about the guy who is a full on bigamist, and he's like, I love both of them. I love you both equally. Okay, sir, yes, that's your logic, but
But he
that ain't
doesn't
right.
love both
And no one on the
equally.
streets,
He doesn't love both equally.
right, and no one in these streets would accept that. Like, what, he's gonna go to her mama's house, sit in front of her, and say she's gonna be my number one mistress, and we gonna have whole family? No, no. He knew
No,
it was
see,
wrong. That's why he
no.
waited to tell her. That's why he didn't tell her from front end. Okay, we're about to get down, but I got a wife somewhere. He knew not to say all that stuff. He knew
I
not to
think the
bring out the
ratchet part.
truth.
I feel like the ratchet part, like, we may see what where his fault is. To me, and I don't remember if they got into this in the show, but I know they got into it in the book. Is that, yes, he could have taken care of her and still had their pseudo family whenever he was in town. But the main sticking point, I think, for Sunja and like their society at that time period is that their kid could not have his name. Their kids could not have his name, and so that was like a big thing that kept coming up. Like, my baby needs a name. He has to have a name. Otherwise, it'll bring shame on our family. And what kind of future will we have if our kid doesn't have a name, like a last name, basically a family name?
Exactly. And so to know the weight of that, dude knew from get go. Like, I'm gonna have all these extra kids with you out in these streets. I don't care how much he takes care of them, what kind of top ran ramen he brings home to his side kids. At the end of the day, he ain't giving them a name. He knows what the game is. He knew he was telling. He knew what he was doing to Chick from get go. My thing is, I believe that he was of the mindset of the traditional F boy who has side families. Like, I say this as a half Nigerian. I know how that goes. Y'all, come on now. Y'all heard the stereotype. Got a family in America and a family in Nigeria. Like, it's happened since the beginning of time. Dudes doing this kind of stuff. I do think he cared about her. I do think that he was surprised by her. He fell for her. All the wonderful feelings, all that stuff. But At the end of the day, ratchet. I'm done with my diatribe.
Well, I still have sympathy for Kohansu, and I'm sorry that they're in that situation for both of them. Hopefully, I don't know, based on episode 4, I don't know how they're going to paint Kohansu, but I'm holding out that he can be kind of redeemed at some point.
I think Kohan Sue, like real talk, I'm gonna make this up because I don't know yet, but y'all know I like to make up a story. This is what happened. Korean guy gets over to Japan. He has to hustle, bustle, do whatever he needs to do. He ends up in places that maybe the innocent Kohan Soo never would have ended up in. And then somewhere in there, he makes a good marriage to a Japanese woman that gives him a leg up, but also means that he always has to prove himself. He always has to deliver. And so when he has to go back to Korea to handle business for the family, because I'm assuming that his Japanese wife is somehow connected to wealth or to privilege or whatever, then he gets to breathe. In Korea, he gets to be himself again. He gets to get back in touch with the young boy he used to be. Then he meets an innocent woman who wants him for him, who doesn't want him because he's proving himself, doesn't want him because he has to be the good, dutiful husband for these kids from a woman that he's not really checking for, who might or might not love him for real. Like, yeah, he meets a tenderoni. Of course, he's gonna be sprung on a tenderoni, and he plays the tenderoni, and then he thinks that just taking care of her is enough. Suppose he changes his mind for real, for real. Like looking out for Sunja here, right? She a character, but let's look out for her. Would you tell her to put her eggs in a basket with some dude who will take care of her at his whim? Her whole survival, her children's survival on the whim of this guy? Suppose he starts thinking that she looks old or her body isn't what it used to be or he's no longer checking for her, then she and her kids are on the street. Like, nah, nah.
I agree with you there. Like, I don't think that she should have just taken his word, like, oh, you're going to take care of me. Like, I feel like she had to kind of look for, I mean, she didn't even know it was going to happen, basically. I mean, it just kind of came out of nowhere, but she had to see if there was another way for her to live a more secure and honorable life. So I don't fault her for that, but I still have sympathy for Kohansu and how she crushed his dream.
And then that leads us to Isaac, right?
Before
Okay.
we go there, I wanted to point out one of the things that I thought was extremely poetic because we really haven't met him yet. But one of the poetic scenes was the meeting of her past and her future as Isaac is getting off the ferry, riddled with tuberculosis, falling all over, can't really handle himself. And then you have Kohan Su walking past and they bump into each other
Yep.
as he's heading to get onto the ferry. And I was like, whoa, that was a really like cool scene if you are fully aware and paying attention to what's going on. That that's her future and her past meeting each other.
Yep. I saw that too, and that was dope. I think the show has a number of places where they do those kinds
Yes,
of things and
yes.
they have these symbolic scenes, and we'll talk about it later because I noticed it in other episodes. But I totally saw the same thing and bumping into each other, like on the heels of her having that argument, conflict, whatever we want to call it, lovers tiff, okay? On the heels of them having that, he's running past angry and then he bumps into her future. And that's how we meet Isaac, sickly, earnest, missionary Isaac. Who would like to talk about him first?
Yeah, I mean, it's curious to see these people come to life. And he did come like that in the book. He came sick on his way to Japan, and he's looking specifically for their boarding house because his brother had stayed there. And it's an insignificant detail, but that's why he was seeking them out, because his brother had stayed there many years before when he was traveling to Japan. And he says, you have to stay here. This family is great. The wife can really cook. The husband's a gentleman. And so he was looking for that place. And you know what? Isaac or Isaac, he has a history of being sick. Now, I don't know if he's had tuberculosis before and almost died, or if he's just been sick all his life, or different type of ailments because he's a weak man. But I'm wondering if that's what led him in. It is what led him into the ministry. Sorry, I'm rambling because my memory's like picking up some stuff that I had forgotten about Isaac, and I don't know if it came up in this episode or not. You can tell me, but He's going to Japan as kind of like a missionary to open up some church, a Christian church. His brother did the same. And the reason why he sought that path is because he thought that he would have a short life and that he would never get married and have a family, and that this was the best way to have a purpose and to serve for his life. So he's a complicated character. I hope they get more into what he's about in this story.
They kind of hinted at that though. I mean, when he was having the conversation with her in the restaurant, I want to say that he kind of said something along those lines. I'd have to go back and watch it
Yeah, I would
again, but
too.
what you're saying jives with what I believed about him, or maybe what I assumed about him, because he clearly did say that he's sickly, and then someone asked if he came from a sickly family or something, and then he
Yeah,
said
and he
that
said no.
his brother was sicker than he was, or that his brother, or no, maybe he said his
I think
brother
he was
wasn't sick.
stronger.
Right,
Yeah, he
right,
was stronger than he was. Right.
Okay.
right.
Yeah, my memory's not the best, and then stuff starts to get muddled between what I saw and what I read, and so the show strays away from the book with Isak a little bit because he does hear them talking about the whole pregnancy when Sunja reveals this to the mom, and he has sympathy for Sunja. But in the book, he approaches the mom, not Sunja, and talks to her. And the mom presents the option to Sunja. Now, I don't know the significance of that and like how that makes a difference that they changed it in the show where he kind of has this little mini date with Sunja to present it to her. But I found that like an interesting change, and I couldn't see why they would change it.
To be honest, I don't understand that either because I kind of wondered while he was presenting this to her and while it kind of flew, why didn't he talk to her mom or why didn't the mother become addressed? Because notice when she was talking to Kohansu about the baby, her first words were, "Oh, okay, so when will you be able to come meet my mom?" And he was like, meet your mom for what?" Because that's formality. You have to address the parents and get the parents' permission. So why they didn't have him talk to the mom first or have a even if it was a short scene, why they didn't have him talk to the mom was a little strange to me.
Yeah, and because it seemed like it was really the mom's decision, when at least in those times the parents are the ones that make the decision for the daughters and who they're going to marry. And so I was confused as to why they changed that, because in the book it was like I can help your situation. You guys nursed me back to life. You were so kind to me. I'm not going to live long, but I can give your grandchild a name and take care of your daughter, for as long as I'm alive. And the mom was just like, hey, Sunja, this is what you're going to have to do. It wasn't even like Sunja really had a choice in it all in the book.
Right. And maybe modern sensibilities and the opportunity to kind of create an intimacy in a relationship between those two characters is why they decided to do it for the show, especially since, it would have been more realistic that he went to the mother and the mother kind of decided, but then it would have, there's a pro and a con. I mean, if I had been the director, I would have done it the way it was in the book, because it would have shown how Sunja maybe was at the whim of like society and her family and circumstance, and not as self-propelling as we would have naturally wanted her to be. It would have just been interesting, but I understand kind of why they did it. Sung Ray, how did you like Esau? I'm now calling him Esau instead of
It was
Isaac.
the
It's
reason why I
making
call him
me.
Isak. The reason why I'm calling him Isak is because when I was reading the book, I was also listening to the audiobook,
Mm.
and he was called Isak in the book, in the
Ah.
And
audiobook.
the same for the drama. In the drama, it's Isak. It's not Isaac. It's Isak.
Oh, okay. You know what? I'm like looking. It's like I'm making their names Christian names in my head, like because of their family. I'm like going, well, maybe they must have named them Christian names, and therefore,
It is a
but maybe
Christian name.
that's the Christian version of their names. I'm messing up. What do you think, Sung
Well,
Ray,
I'm saying
about him?
when we met him, they did tell us that was when the pastor was talking or somebody was talking. They did tell us that was a biblical name, but it's
Okay.
Isak. It's pronounced Isak. We're using our English. what we understand. So, it is what it is.
Right.
I like him as a character. I liked his person. I thought he was handsome. I'm not sure if that's how the book portrayed
Girl.
him, but I thought he was handsome.
Girl, yes he is.
Um,
I agree. He is handsome.
so yes, I was like, oh, okay, good job, Sunja. Like you have, moved on from fuckboy to someone who is about business. And one of the things I am going to laugh about as we just fast forward to later scenes when we talk about the sister-in-law's passing and how the pastor came over, and a few other things I noted. Um, Isak obviously played a big role in Sunja's later life beliefs because she was not someone who came from a family that was Christian. She was not someone who came from a family that was into praying and things like that. But I noted every time they ate, he mentioned prayer. I noted that, he brought in faith a lot. And then as you look at her later life, that's something you notice from her. So I was like, oh, okay. So I guess, I just was like, that's interesting how I guess wherever her family was at, that wasn't something that she had a strong faith or belief in, or if they even mentioned it in the book, because that was something I want to talk about if they even mentioned it in the book, but it was something that she obviously held on to through her later life because it still had remnants there. But I thought he was a good character. I thought he was honorable because there was no reason for him to do this. He didn't gain anything other than, adding a wife, a burden, basically, someone that he has to take care of, someone he's, got to be responsible for because she's coming from a place of nothingness. But he took this on, and I was like, okay, that made him look even much more like, oh, what a good guy. He's going in to help this family just because he happened to be here. And his reasoning was because they helped him when he was ill. And I was like, wow, even still, that is really honorable. Like, wow. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I like his
Well,
character.
well, the minute he got off the boat, I knew what was up. And it's just because I watch stories a lot and I read a lot. The minute I saw him, I was like, he's the one that she's going to marry to get that name. Because someone, like, if I were reading a typical romance, I love my romances, it would have been this whole romance between the two of them and him stepping up
And
for
there you
one
go,
reason.
right there. That's how come I'm saying he's honorable. Had they just had a regular romance, different story, and that's what I thought we were gonna see. But when the reasoning came out and when he explained, I was like, oh, okay, go ahead then. So yeah,
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think I add stuff to stories. So the thing I kind of added before I even knew what Natasha was saying about him not thinking he'd have a family. I mean, I'm sure he's being kind and honorable and all that good stuff. But I do think there's a little bit of selfishness. There is a little bit because he never thought he would get married. He's been sickly. If you think that you're going to die, you don't move in particular ways because you don't think you're going to have a family. You don't think you're going to be able to completely take care of a family, whatever. And he specifically asked her if she can make room in her heart eventually for him. So he's planning to have a real marriage. It's not like he's marrying her and he's like, okay, you're gonna have your kid and you know, we'll leave and go elsewhere, but you'll be okay. I think he's getting something out of it. I think it's 70% honorable and 30%. This dude never thought he'd get a wife, or maybe wherever he's from, people know him as sickly. They don't want to give their daughters over to him. And now here he has the opportunity to marry an attractive young woman who clearly comes from a certain mindset. Yeah, he's winning too.
Yeah,
He's not
he's
losing.
he's winning too, but that's not his main motivation. And I don't think that him getting something out of the relationship, a family, a young wife, makes what he did less honorable.
No,
Um,
no, no, no.
I,
No, that's why I said 70-30.
I think we can all agree that what he did was honorable and that he is going to get something out of it. But I don't think that that was his main motivation. Was that, oh, it's just, it was like a sweet addition to what he was doing. It's like, oh, okay, I'm doing this and I'll have a wife, and this can be good for all of us. And I was happy for him that he got something out of it too. That he had potentially was going to get something out of it too.
Right. Now, let me ask a weird question, and I don't expect y'all to have the answer, but You all notice that that actor in the opening credit, he's wearing tennis shoes versus all the other men are wearing real like men's shoes. What does that mean? Does that mean anything or not at all?
I didn't notice that. I wonder if it's a character, like a character trait of the actor, possibly. I don't know.
Yeah, I just noticed he was wearing tennis shoes, like white tennis shoes, and it just stood out.
I'll have to pay attention
They
next
look a
time.
particular way.
I noticed the white tennis shoes, but I didn't think, oh, Isak's wearing the tennis shoes. I wonder what, I didn't think about it. So next time I watch the intro, I'm going to pay more attention and see if I see something in it.
And so, what else did you all notice about this episode?
I noticed, and this is a departure from the book that I'm not sure where it's going to go, but when Solomon goes to the landowner to try to convince her to sell her property, and she, is like, no, I'm not hearing it. And so in the show, he's like, I need my grandmother to talk to her. So he has Sunja talk to this homeowner, and that helps. It kind of helps him. It goes in his favor a bit. But in the book, completely different. Completely different. And I'm still
Really?
trying to, yes, and I'm still trying to process why the change and what the significance of the change is. So in the book, he goes to his dad and asks his dad because his dad has lots of money and he's kind of powerful and he has people who work for him. So he asks, his dad's like eager to help. And so he says, I'll help you and we'll send somebody to talk to this woman. So, I hesitate to say this. I guess I could say it because it doesn't even come up in the show at all. But in the book, his dad sends somebody to talk to this woman, and the next day the woman dies. And so
What?
then
Whoa,
yes.
whoa.
So then it's like, did some gangsters come and kill this woman for her land? Like, and so the Japanese are like, we don't even want to touch it. We don't want to buy this woman's land anymore. It's going to look bad upon us because you sent your dad. And so it's totally bad for Solomon in the book. In the show, it's different. It's like it's looking good. Like his grandma talks to the lady, and they kind of bond on being from Korea and the special rice, and you know, and it seems like it's taking a turn in his favor. So I found that very interesting and totally different.
And I
It is.
kind of feel like because of the grandma, that is why they took this turn. They took this turn because they were like, from my eyes and what I'm seeing, they were using this to give you more details, more history, more backstory into the things that they went into dealt with during their youth, into their parallels as this is not just Sunja's story, but this is a story many women from that time period could tell you about the things that they dealt with. Like, that's how I perceive this. Now that you've just shared that, I'm like, oh, they were trying to make sure we saw the hardships and the things that they went through being women during that time period, and how their lives are still affected in their their older golden ages, how they're still affected by some of these things, because you've got both of them had not been to school. Why? Because at the time it just wasn't important for girls to go to school or for people to go to school. Both of them were very interested or pressed at the time with the concept of having rice, and how rice was a hard thing to come by because they weren't selling it to Koreans. Both of them. So now that I'm paying attention to that scene, I see a lot of what they were pulling to give us. Otherwise, I guess that we won't get it, because how else are they going to share that? How else are they going to give us these stories unless they break out and have a whole separate scene where they talk about this? You get me? And it would
Yeah,
kind of be
I
kind of
agree.
out
I
of
agree
place.
with you, Sung Ray. I think that has to be it. It has to be. They had to have that conversation to tell us some stuff that they wouldn't know how to insert into the show otherwise. In the time for in the amount of time that they have in an hour or 4 seasons or whatever. So, I guess that's why it's just so drastically different. I mean,
Yeah.
Don't you? I mean, you guys can see that. Like, it's a
Oh,
drastic
definitely.
change.
It
It's
it
So
is
wild. Like,
it
whoa.
is it is a drastic change, but I think it's actually genius because not only did they do everything that Sung Ray pointed out, like giving the history of these women and Korean women and that time frame, but like we need as many opportunities as possible to kind of do parallels between Solomon and Sunja because we also see kind of the Koreanness of how that translates for Solomon. Solomon is learning to be Korean at that table. He is learning what it means at that table because he was going to trade on his Korean heritage to get the deal, but he didn't know what he was trading on. He didn't understand completely, maybe just because they didn't, the way that older parents don't completely talk about their past until like something comes up and then you find out all this great stuff or horrible stuff about their past. It took him sitting there with her to go, oh, there's more going on. And I think at one point he's surprised he didn't know something about his grandmother. I forget what it was. And so I think there was also just like kind of introducing, because they really get into it in episode 4, but like kind of Korea and Korean heritage as a thing that is valued and is lost. I think that
Yeah,
that was happening at that table.
right. I think you guys are both right in that it is a genius way to introduce that and to have that element of Solomon kind of learning about the history and what Koreans before him went through, because he's second generation born in Japan. His father was born in Japan too, so they do have that disconnect with Korea, and so that scene brings that, and I think that was very helpful, and it was a genius way for them to do it. I guess for me, I'm just trying to figure out like what we lost in doing it that way. Was it worth it? And as I'm thinking about it, I guess it was worth it for them to do it the way they did it in the show, because what we lost was the history of, from the way they did it in the book, where the father has somebody go talk to the woman. That had some layers to it too, and it was kind of going back to how Koreans were looked at in Japan, because the father had this pachinko business and they're kind of looked at as like shady, kind of not honorable type of business. So they were kind of getting into that too in the book. But I feel like maybe this was a better trade. Maybe that was an okay trade off, and this was a better way to go about it. Depending on what the producers wanted to portray in the show overall.
Right. I also think the book version shows a lack of closeness. Like, this was Solomon's deal. And we get the impression from the show that his name was on this deal, leaving up to his father, who's leaving it up to some other person to go convince her. That's really like a distance. It's like, dude, do you really want the deal? Are you doing the most to get this deal? I mean, people have been showing up at this woman's house trying to convince her, and she's not being convinced. And you just gonna leave it up to your father's friend? That seems too far. So I definitely like the television version more.
And I'm also going to go ahead and segue here because one of the things for me and in my notes that I wrote about, because I found it to be extremely significant, was the concept of this taste of rice. So, like, I never realized that there was a different taste for rice from different places. Like, I think aside from realizing jasmine rice, your regular white rice, brown rice, like, yeah, those have different tastes, but like rice from a different country or a different place having a different taste. I never knew that. And so I was in my mind as a Midwesterner is where I'm born and raised, and then moving to the South, trying to figure out what would be the closest thing that could make sense for me. I thought about, I'm from St. Louis, so St. Louis style ribs. And I was like, okay, yeah, now if you go someplace and you get ribs somewhere and they say, oh, these are St. Louis style ribs, but you from St. Louis, and that ain't the same thing. So I was like, okay, that I might be able to use as my comparison. Do you all have any kind of comparisons or things like that that stick out for you? Because I had to parallel it for myself.
Uh, I totally understand where you're coming from. I can't think of a specific example for me, but I do know that you don't really appreciate or understand what you have is different until you go elsewhere. So I can totally see that, because I'm a person who's living somewhere where I didn't grow up also, and you notice these small differences, and when you have a taste from home, or just like an action or some sort of cultural thing from home, you just like, oh yeah. And maybe someone who's not from either of those places will not even understand what you're seeing or what you're feeling or what you're tasting. So I get it, but I don't have a specific example.
What about you? Something else?
I mean, other than like St. Louis fried rice, haha. I think the rice thing was very particular, but I don't have any examples that are exactly like that.
No, I think you just gave a perfect one, though, St. Louis fried rice, because I don't care where you go, you're not. I'm laughing because it is so
It's true.
apropos. You're not gonna taste rice like that anywhere else.
Yeah, but that's about like how you make rice and not about
Super
like
true.
how it
Not
is.
the rice itself, right?
Right, right. Maybe how pizza in New York is different from pizza elsewhere because even if it's made the same, the New York City water, it's different. It's funny.
Yeah, I was going to say that with the New York example, because they say that about the pizza dough and the bagels, that the water is different. So it's not going to taste like that anywhere else.
Does that have any significance?
I think it's just nostalgia for
Okay.
these women who haven't been to their home in how many years did she say she hadn't been back? Many, many years. She's been
Yeah, it
gone
had
more than
been
she's
many years.
was in her homeland.
And
Right.
I'm going to parallel that too, though, because I think it did have significance to if you go back her last time having it. This would be me jumping over into another episode, but unfortunately, I might have to go here for the sake. Is when her mom cooked for her before she left, and she went and worked hard to get her some rice so that she could have a taste of home before leaving. And I was like, oh, that made me think about the movie Soul Food and how food can have those kinds of connections to home and a place of feeling like you belong or where you're supposed to be because this is, your stuff from your place, your people. So, I was just looking at the symbolicness of the things that they've done because I feel like this director has done a superb job of putting these like poetic, symbolic things in place. But go ahead.
We can definitely talk about rice again in episode 4 because I agree with you. There's some significance there. But I mean, I'm pulling this completely out of my ear. I did not think about this before. But the rice, I wonder, speaks to kind of Solomon. He looks like them, but he's not the same flavor. you know? Anything else that you all noticed in episode 3 that you want to talk about?
I'm kind of fuzzy on everything that happened, but I think we talked about the main 3 events: the deal, in being introduced to Isak, and Kohansu. Yeah, and
Right.
how he, yeah.
I mean, I think he got another call from Hannah.
Did he? What did she
Um,
say in this one?
I just remember when they were celebrating, he gets a call from Hannah and he
Yeah,
doesn't get to fully talk to her because,
Tom
the
hangs
boss
up.
comes in, yeah, and hangs up. And that was just super rude. Hannah's like this figure that's hard to hold on to. And here he has his life and his success getting in the way of reaching out to her or helping her in some way. So
Yeah, I'm curious to see how Hana is treated in the show. Like, how much more of her we're gonna see. She's super annoying to me. Like, I don't like. I have sympathy for whatever she's going through. Like, she's going through something, and I don't like for people to be in pain. But she's so annoying. She's a character in the book that I did not like. So, but I think she's being portrayed right now in a somewhat sympathetic way, and I'm just curious to see where her character is going to go on the show. If they're gonna develop her at all, or if she's just going to be this mysterious person that calls every now and then to talk to Solomon, because it's starting to get annoying to me because I don't like her.
That whole scene really agitated me. I was agitated because I was like, why would Tom hang up on his phone call? He's celebrating his success. And the whole point of you wanting him to get off the phone was just so y'all could drink champagne. He's in the middle of a phone call, like, you all could have waited. What the world? It wasn't that serious.
Yeah, that was rude. That was rude and unnecessary, but I don't like Hana, so I was like, whatever. Like, but still, Tom didn't know who he was talking to. He didn't know how important that
He didn't. He
conversation
didn't.
was. So for him to hang up the phone like that was just rude. I don't even know why they put that in the show. That was unnecessary. But
I was wondering if the purpose was just to show like Solomon's life and things about Solomon weren't really considered as important because in their head he was their tool to do what they wanted him to do.
I guess
Like that's the
probably,
only way I could look at that.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I think that we have exhausted episode 3. And so, everyone, please look out for our episode 4, where we will further discuss this great show, Pachinko. I am something else, and
Song Ray.
have a good one, you guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to Black Girl Soul. We enjoyed having you, and please subscribe, like, and follow our Facebook page, YouTube channel, Twitter page, Instagram page, and join our Facebook group. You can also find us on Patreon. Please look below for links. See you guys next week.